Hi, I'm Connie Cook Smith, and I'd like to share with you my true ghost story. It was a chilly, cloudy November day when I went to look at the apartment for rent on East Reed Street. This historic district of mansions and townhouses from the 1800s in Baltimore features a pleasant quadrangle park. It's anchored at the center by the earliest Washington monument in the United States. Now it was the 1970s. I was in my 20s and single. My roommate and I had finally really gotten on each other's nerves, and I decided I definitely wanted to live alone. I loved this location, and figured the advertised apartment would have to be in pretty bad shape for me not to want it. The live-in landlady answered the buzzer and explained that the place was the front half of the 3rd floor. Was I interested in climbing lots of stairs every day? I didn't mind. I like lofty places, and I was young. She told me that Kathy, the current occupant, was presently in, but we could call her and see if it was all right to look around now. And so the way was cleared. Minus the landlady and her reluctant knees, her husband did all the maintenance. I climbed the wide old wooden stairwells to a new adventure. Kathy had opened the door for me. It opened on a narrow hallway that had been converted to a butler's pantry kitchenette. Well, so much for the kitchen. I wasn't much into entertaining anyway. But the end of that hallway opened up into a magnificent living room. High ceilings. 3 gigantic windows simply flooding the place with southern light. An original marble fireplace. And enough space for, well, about half an old-fashioned ballroom. I was in love. Without even seeing the bedroom and bath, I murmured, "I'll take it." But then, as I gazed around more deeply, I suddenly blurted out to Kathy, "Is it haunted?" She looked at me, very startled, paused, then said, "Sometimes I think so." Then we acted as if that never happened. I hadn't seen anything, just all of a sudden I sensed something was there, and knew it, certainly enough to say so to a stranger. But, amnesia-like, we moved on to other subjects. I glanced at the bedroom, about a third the size of the living room, and therefore spacious but cozy, also with a marble fireplace, and a good-sized window over the alley on the east. The bathroom had been carved out of the bedroom and was strictly a utilitarian space, although there was a nice old tile floor, and the fixtures looked like they came from the 1930s or 40s, but they worked. I was exhilarated. I thanked Kathy for the tour. She was a painter, an artist, who had lived there 3 years, and I wished her luck with her move to be with her boyfriend in the suburbs. I practically skipped down the long flights of stairs to the landlady's door and plunked down a deposit. I wish I could remember how much it was in those days, but I don't. When the weekend came, I began to move in. With friends, a lot of things got moved on Saturday, but I spent Saturday night in my old place because my bed couldn't be moved until Sunday. I knew that would probably make for a rough Monday morning at work, what with my first unsettled night in the new place being Sunday night. But oh, I never dreamed how very unsettled it would be. Back to Saturday. During a break in the moving-in activities, a friend and I were sitting on the floor, gazing out at the sky-filled windows and taking in all the old proportions around us. Nothing had changed structurally in this room for over 120 years. And I said to my friend that I could almost imagine the sound of horses' hooves clopping down the street below, whereupon suddenly we heard horses' hooves clopping down the street below. My friend was less startled than I, her being a Baltimore native and used to this neighborhood's presence of horse-drawn vendor carts. But I was originally from out of state. I had very seldom seen them. As I rushed in amazement to the window to have a look, we both cracked up at this hilarious moment of synchronicity. But now it was Sunday night, and I was not laughing. Tired Sunday night before a Monday workday morning, and where was everything? Where was anything? Moving can be the worst stress. I thought about the contrast between where I now resided and where I worked. A Fortune 500 company headquartered high up in a downtown office tower made of glass and steel. Inside, all was muted lighting and gleaming parquet floors and rather seductive music. The better to clinch deals with, my dear. I was only a receptionist, but I enjoyed managing 10 incoming lines on the electronic switchboard, keeping all the executives' calls and messages straight, and greeting and hosting the many businessmen who arrived from around the world. Rest. I must get some rest. A busy Monday morning was on the way. I finally got the bed made up. It was tucked into a corner opposite both the fireplace and the east window, with that shade now down like a droopy eyelid. I fell into an exhausted sleep until sometime deep in the middle of the night, when I was awakened by the most awful thing. I was struck awake by very hot energy coursing up and down the length of my body. The movement was as if hands were sweeping all over me to determine what I was. But I didn't actually feel hands. I felt powerful currents of a blind and furious force examining my presence. I felt floods of intense heat, cascades of spewing rage and hatred, and I became utterly paralyzed with terror. In the darkness, I could see nothing, but someone or something was hating me with enormous fury and power. I was engulfed in wave after wave of exploratory rage, and I was powerless to stop it, powerless to do anything at all, except be totally horrified. I wanted to reach for the phone, but I could not move my arm. I wanted to scream, but my throat was shut down. I couldn't utter a whimper, and I couldn't seem to move in any way. I wondered if I was going to be killed. Eventually, I don't know how long, the onslaught began to lessen. Finally, it ceased. My mind told me this was just a horrible, horrible dream, that dawn would come soon, that I would get up and go to work downtown in that modern, busy office tower of smoky glass and shining steel, and all this terror would evaporate and seem silly and unreal. I lay there waiting for reality to take hold of me and return me to my normal sense of safety. I wanted to drift off and get a little more sleep. I wanted to look forward to decorating my new home. But I could do nothing but lay there, wide-eyed, barely breathing, wordlessly praying for morning to come. It seemed to take forever. Finally, I felt safe enough to step out of bed and try to pull myself together. Needless to say, it was a very tough morning. I chose to tell coworkers that I was just tired from the move. I wanted the lingering fear to wear off and disappear. By noon, at the latest, I expected to be my giggly old self again, maybe even invite someone over to see my new digs. But as the afternoon wore on, I began feeling more and more oppressed. I began to dread going to my new home, especially with the prospect of this November time of year making it dark before I even got there. By 4 p.m., I was scared enough to call Jeremy. Jeremy was a sweet young black man, over 6.5 feet tall. He had to duck through most doorways, and he was heavy into the first generations of personal computers and white magic. The joke was, with me being Caucasian and just 5'1", that he was my little brother. Jeremy was somewhat of a giant in height, and he was definitely a giant in intellect. Our far-ranging discussions covered all of this universe and spilled over into others. So I knew that recounting my experience to him would not faze him in the slightest, and indeed, it did not. That alone was mightily helpful to me, just someone to listen to me, without the least bit of concern about my credibility or my sanity. I thought he might even have some answers, and in fact he did. Very comfortable with mysterious energies, Jeremy approached the matter analytically, shooting questions at me that I can't remember now, but seeming to require only a series of yes or no answers. Frankly, all I really wanted was for this hulk of a guy to escort me home this night. I was scared. I wanted a big man to protect me. But he was not having any of that. He had university classes that night, for one thing, and for another, he knew I needed to handle this in a different way. I needed to use my own power, not his, to deal with this problem. I knew he was right. And so, after running diagnostics on the situation through my input, Jeremy concluded that a spirit was there who was infuriated over the change in human occupants, and that it was up to me to make peaceful overtures to this wrathful being. After all, he, she, or it was there first. Kathy had left, and now my presence was an unfamiliar and therefore disturbing and unwelcome force. Well, great. I was supposed to reason with this beastly consciousness that I couldn't even see, when what I really needed to do was find all my disorganized things and maybe get some rest? But I was certain there would be no rest if tonight was anything like the night before. I wondered if I would be able to stay there. I imagined trying to explain to the landlady why I wanted my rent and deposit back, why I was leaving. But what Jeremy had advised me to do appealed to me on some fundamental level. I left work early in order to arrive before darkness fell. But it was nevertheless a murky November twilight when I arrived at the apartment. My legs were a bit rubbery as I unlocked the door. But suddenly, I felt a flash of anger that I'd been robbed of the joy of moving into this lovely old place, and so I went striding purposefully down the rest of the hall, around through the living room, into the bedroom, whereupon I saw absolutely nothing but a heap of moving-in jumble and my rumpled bed from this morning. It all looked so ordinary. I felt almost foolish. But then the clear memory of my anguish the night before swept over me.